Well, welcome to another episode of the Outside Insights podcast, where we engage individuals who are making a real difference. I'm your host, Chris Burkhard, and today I'm thrilled to have Pat Callihan on the show. Pat is CEO for Tech Impact. It's a national not-for-profit organization whose mission is to leverage tech for social impact. Tech Impact has a lot of offerings, tech-based education, services and support that are designed to help not-for-profit organizations and a host of workforce development programs. And I'm sure we'll get into all those, I hope. Pat, I was thinking we could start. It always seems interesting when I have old acquaintances on here, but do you mind if we start with how we met?
Sure.
Yeah. So I don't know what it meant to you, but I had recently just started a business. I reached out to a member of your management team. I'm so proud to tell this story of who I am, what I do. And he says, sure, I'll send somebody to meet you. And then you showed up, and that was 20 some years ago. So I don't know what was your impression of that? I'd be curious to hear.
Gosh, you're really testing my memory, but if I recall, it was in Newark at your site in Newark.
Yeah.
And I remember meeting you and some of your team, and I was like, I think I said, gosh, I drive by here every day and I've never noticed this before.
I think
but it was great to learn about you and your work and who you are and your company, because at the time we were probably starting work. Well, no, this goes way back because this would have been before I started.
This was 01.
Yeah, this was 01. So this is when I was at CAI, I guess.
I guess it was.
Yeah. And so we were always looking for partners, and of course, having organizations that were close by to us were great. And I just remember, listening to you. You were very passionate about what you did and what you were building, and it just seemed like you seemed like the kind of person I'd like to get to know.
Well, I think I only wanted to touch on it not because I knew it would be so relevant and the most important meeting for you, but that was my first meeting. Like that was the opportunity to kind of. Yeah, we had just opened the doors. I don't remember if that was pre or post 9/11, but it was certainly very close to that time. And I didn't expect it to be as meaningful to you. But how often do you get a chance to have a guest on your show who was probably your first business, conversation? And we've been business acquaintances and networking buddies and kind of like leadership friends kind of off and on ever since. So I'm appreciative of that very, very, very much. I'd love to have you start with just, obviously lay out Tech Impact. It does a lot. Talk a little bit about the mission and what you're driving to achieve with Tech Impact.
Yeah. So, our mission is fairly straightforward. It's to leverage technology for social impact. So, what does that mean? I mean, it can mean a lot of different things. For us, we have something called a theory of change that a lot of nonprofits have or should have. And that is basically guides our work. And our theory of change is really rooted in two distinct areas. The first being workforce development. So in that, we work with young people primarily and train them for jobs in technology. So we have several different programs. IT Works is kind of our flagship. We run that in Philadelphia, Wilmington, Delaware, and Las Vegas, Nevada. And that particular program works with 18 to 24-year-olds who are considered disconnected from school or work. So meaning that they don't have a college degree. And if they are working, they're probably working, in a minimum wage type of role. So really what we're working to achieve there is to train them for more of a career, right? So something that they can learn, that they can grow in for the rest of their lives if they so choose, but that also gets them an opportunity to earn sustainable wages. So and benefits, so really bring some stability into their lives in terms of work, and then also give them a pathway towards a career. So we've been doing that for about 12 years now. We've graduated about 1,400 students through that. And then we have a couple other programs. One is called CX Works, and that trains young people for same demographic for jobs in contact centers, so call center technology. And that started in Nevada, where those jobs are really plentiful and quite good. We later ported that back to Delaware, where we work with the Baylor Correctional Institute. So these are women who are incarcerated, but are within 6 months or so of being of re-entering society. And so we work with those women to train them on these skills so that when they leave that facility, they're in a position to go and get a career. And so that's more of a pilot program. We've been doing that just under a year now, and we look to expand that. And then beyond that, we have several other things that we're engaged in terms of workforce. Once the pandemic hit, CARES Act in Delaware sought to help people to enter jobs in technology. So we had a contract with the Department of Labor, trained scores of people through that. We later had that extended through a program called H-1B, which is a national Department of Labor program where literally we're working right now to train about 700 people for jobs in technology within the state of Delaware. So, workforce development is certainly one area where we're heavily engaged. The other part of our theory of change is really around capacity building. And in that, we seek to help nonprofit organizations leverage technology for their own mission. And that takes a lot of different forms. We have something called the Technology Learning Center, which has a couple hundred artifacts online. So anything from multi-part training courses on cybersecurity and fortifying your nonprofit to looking at software, like donor management software. We do kind of a consumer reports for that. And then from there, we help those nonprofits leverage that technology through consulting and integration work. And then finally, we do support work. So we are an outsourced IT provider for a little over 350 nonprofits across the U.S.
So I imagine you didn't just wake up and do all this great stuff. Is it organizations or government that's bringing problems forward, and then you're figuring out how to address them? Do you spend your time on the problems of constituents where you're able to figure out how to do this stuff? I mean, I think it's the really interesting thing, because I'm sure you started with one, but you've certainly expanded to address many other issues.
We have, and, we try to take stock of what's going on and how we can be helpful. Like during the pandemic, I'll give you an example, in Las Vegas, like many communities, schools just shut down. And so there was a real concern about how to help the students engage in online courses. But of course, many of the students live below poverty and don't necessarily have an internet connection in their home or have a way to access the internet in their home. And so, we set up literally overnight, like a call center for 300 people to be able to make outbound calls to the students in Clark County, which is the third largest school district in the country, and sign them up for internet and sign them up to receive a laptop so that they could continue their schoolwork. So, that's one example of sort of an issue of the moment. Other things are more linear. Like you look at something like cloud computing, and you probably know this, like a 10 years ago, no one really talked about cloud computing. Now everyone's using cloud computing. And so we felt, some responsibility as technology leaders to learn as much as we could, help nonprofits make sense of it, and help them make good decisions for leveraging that infrastructure for their own organizations. And so early on, we did a lot of education, and then we learned how to integrate that. And then we helped literally hundreds and hundreds of nonprofits move to those platforms because we felt like it was in their best interest. And sometimes we did that, at the expense of our own support contracts, right? Because
Sure.
maybe they didn't need that anymore, but we felt like it was the right thing to do. So yeah, I mean, as you know, like technology is constantly evolving and changing. And so we feel a responsibility in the nonprofit sector to be on top of those changes and to help guide nonprofits in the use of their technology so that they're getting, they're fulfilling their missions, number one, and using as many of their resources in order to fulfill those missions.
I think it's hard enough to make it in a not-for-profit world, and then you have to start to think about the technology and the infrastructure and the systems that you need to be able to run a business. It's a difficult, I think it's a difficult equation. What was the origin of Tech Impact? Where did it begin?
Yeah. Tech Impact started about 20 years ago, and the origin of that was through Microsoft. So Microsoft at the time was making considerable donations to the nonprofit sector of software. And, when I say software, like, yeah, Word and Excel and all that, but really like server level software. Mm-hmm. And what they noticed is that they make these donations to the nonprofits, and the nonprofits did not really have the capacity to leverage that technology. They didn't have IT, departments. And so a lot of them would come back to them and ask them for help. And that happened so frequently that they saw the need to start a nonprofit with the purpose of helping other nonprofits with their technology. And the original company name was called NPower, and there were about 12 or so NPowers across the country that started with a matching grant from Microsoft. So Microsoft put up the initial 500,000, and any sort of geography that could find a matching donor for that could then start the program with $1 million. And in that, for us, that was Philadelphia. So we were NPower Pennsylvania, and the William Penn Foundation made the matching funding to get that off the ground. Fast forward now 20 years, and there's really only one NPower left, and they're kind of they're only in workforce development. So the network itself evolved a lot over the years. Many of the organizations just could not find a sustainable business model and went out of business, and others morphed. There's a few of us that morphed into different organizations over time.
Well, it says something about you, leadership, others that are guiding and advising it. Obviously I'm in the workforce development space myself, and it seems as if I have guests and talked to so many people about this path for the non-degreed. Some people call it a star, those that have skills without that. It seems so relevant today with the cost of education versus perhaps the cost of training to code or to learn a call center skill. It just seemed, would you agree that the math just seems to make total sense for someone to make a great livable wage, change their family, and they don't need the burden of 4 years or 6 years of an education to do so?
Yeah, I nothing against formal education. I think formal education is great, but it's just not for everyone. Everyone does not thrive in that environment. And so we do need alternative pathways where folks can be successful without, making the investment of time and money into a 4-year college degree or beyond. And that's really, the space that we play in. And I think what you're seeing is a lot of changes, and you're seeing employers realize that, hey, call it, and I know this from being a manager. I'm sure you know this from managing people. Like sometimes people with master's degrees just, don't want to work that hard or aren't that good. And other times people that don't have a degree want to, they're hungry and they want to work hard. That's not, and I don't mean to generalize.
The level of education has little to do with success, in other words. Yeah.
Yeah. But, and certainly the contrary is true too, right? There's a lot of people that are highly educated that work very, very hard and have earned their way to in their careers. But it just basically states that there are alternatives, right? And I think employers are starting to make changes in this regard. JP Morgan is a good example. At one time, every job at JP Morgan required a college degree. Today, more than 90% of their jobs do not require a college degree. So they realized
Information.
that's huge, right? That's a huge shift. And they realize that, yes, people can come through workforce development programs or just have experience and be very, very successful within their business model. And so they're willing to make those changes. Now, a lot of employers have yet to make those changes, but we're starting to see that shift more and more, especially with the price of going to a four-year college.
I don't know if you've seen the organization Opportunity at Work. I think the LinkedIn founder was an early investor, maybe even the Gates Foundation. But the idea being to really look at jobs and classify them and determine if a four-year degree is appropriate and tear the paper ceiling, I think it's called. But it's interesting stuff. And, I think it's great because I think, JP Morgan is a leading organization. They live by change. They're well run, great leadership. We just have to get other organizations like state governments to look at this, and perhaps we can get the dynamics of jobs, good people to work and jobs filled. It's interesting. So you laid out a lot. What are you excited and passionate about right now? What gets the juices flowing for you that you're really into?
Yeah, we've been growing quite a bit the last few years. We've done a number of acquisitions, which have built out sort of our portfolio. But I think if there's a couple areas that are really, really exciting as far as technology goes, one is data. We did a small acquisition here 2 years ago of the Delaware Data Innovation Lab, and now we just call it the Data Innovation Lab so that we can expand it beyond the borders of Delaware. But the kind of work that's taking place in that data lab is extraordinary. We have a dozen people working in that department, and they're working on all kinds of problems or challenges. Right? I'll give you a couple examples. Like one is to look at, since we're talking about workforce, to look at the state of Delaware and see how many nurses we have and what kind of certifications those nurses have, so that we can look by census tract and compare it to chronic diseases in the state and see where there are nursing deserts for certain types of treatment. And in that, that provides data back to the state of Delaware to help make decisions about where they're going to put resources, either to recruit or to train nurses in particular areas, so that both geography and in certifications, so that we can address those deserts and get people the health care that they need. That's one.
Who's driving those requests?
Well, so that's coming from the state of Delaware. So,
Sure.
Health and Human Services, Delaware Health Information Network, things like that. We also look at housing issues and to see, if we can understand and predict where evictions are likely to happen. What are the markers for evictions? What's likely? When is someone going to get evicted? And if we know that and we can see that by census tract, we can start to move, I say we collectively, like the state can move resources in there and help put preventative measures in place so that people can stay in their homes. I'll cite one more. We're working on an opioid issue right now to look at people that are in treatment for opioids and to look at the markers of those treatments on when someone may relapse and leave treatment. And again, if we can predict when that's going to happen, you can start to prioritize your caseload as a case manager and intervene and make interventions and additional counseling available to those folks before they relapse out of their program. So, those are just a couple examples. There's literally dozens of things we're working on within that lab. And when you start to get excited about technology, data can sound sort of boring, but when you see the applications of data and the promise that, data can hold, then it gets pretty exciting, at least for me.
The entrepreneur in me dreams of that predictive work that you're doing and being able to use it in a for-profit business. I think the use of that is exponential. And I think I like that you're really working on important problems too. It's not just selling more widgets, right? Or blodgets or whatever. It's really important day-to-day issues for where we live and work. Did you always think you were going to be in technology? Was this your path? What's your journey like, your leadership journey a bit, and how'd you end up here?
Yeah, great question. Everything sort of has built on itself. I can remember my father sort of introducing the computer into our house at a very, very young age. This is when, and you,
It's like a Commodore or
no, it was an IBM actually, and but it took 5 floppy disks to start the operating system. So it was very slow, but it was, for word processing and that sort of thing. But that got my interest. And then actually, one year for my birthday, he bought me a Commodore 64, and that was really where I cut my teeth and learned how to do some basic A programming and stuff. And so I think my whole life I've sort of had an interest in computers and sort of the things that you could do with them. And so, most of my career I've been in some part of computing. Now, sometimes that's just been marketing, and other times that's been, banking, but all of it sort of evolved around technology. And then there was another piece I think that I also got from my father, which was to give back. Like I grew up at a young age going to orphanages and bringing meals and things like that. And so I was kind of taught like how important it was to help other people. And I never sought a career really in either one. Mostly I just fell into a career, right? And but
the luckier I get, the harder I work, the luckier I get, whatever that saying is. Yeah.
That's right. But it all sort of converged when I joined Tech Impact, because I'd worked in banking for 10 years. I'd worked in marketing, IT services for a dozen years. And then when this opportunity came up to both be involved in something that was community based and something that was technology based, I had to really take a hard look at it. And I'll tell you, Chris, and I sort of am envious of you because you're an entrepreneur, right? And I always think, God, if I had just thought about being an entrepreneur years ago, I probably would have taken a much different path. Because I was always sort of told, like, get into a big company, stay there, they'll take care of you, right? And so I went to work for a pretty big company. It was Dean Witter and Company, which launched the Discover credit card, and it was a great career. I was there 10 years, and I had a bunch of different jobs, and I just learned everything I could, from collections to customer service to technology. And then when I left there, I kind of got into marketing, but still in computers. And I think sometimes I must have been crazy because I left this huge company, Dean Witter and Company, lots of resources, lots of people, great benefits. Then I went to I remember being scared going to this mid-sized company, what I thought was a small company. And it was probably about, I don't even know, 100 million in revenue or something like that. But then,
right. Yeah.
But then when this job came up, there were 12 people and, about $1 million budget. And I thought, and this was at the beginning of the recession. And I thought, I'm nuts for taking this job. But it was
sometimes nuts is brilliant.
Well, when you look back and it works out, it's brilliant.
Well, when you burn the dock behind you and push off from shore, that's the, you touched on a lot of stuff. I guess the first thing that came to mind is that people probably thinking I'm a little bit bananas because, today technology is in every business plan. It's a part of every business. It's interconnected. It's how you run your business today. But many people can remember when tech was just a department, right? And I know it wasn't just a department. It was driving other things, but it's really become so integrated. And then the world you described, Pat, about, if you went to school or graduated someplace, there was always somebody who was successful saying, go find a good, solid company that'll take care of you. And obviously the world has changed, and I think people know it. but you touched on change right in the opening. So, obviously today people need flexible, nimble skills. They're responsible for their own career, and Tech Impact sounds like it does a pretty cool job of helping, a good bit of a section of the population get those skills. So it's interesting. How would you describe your leadership style? It's quite a story you laid out there. How do you lead?
So I think I lead. I'll give you a couple examples of how I think I lead. One by example. Like, I always feel like I'm not above anything. And in fact, if you want to get under my skin, like, kind of move in the other direction around me. And what do I mean by that? Like, I feel like I'm, good enough to take the trash out at the end of the night and wash the dishes in the sink. And I expect the people around me to feel the same way. Because, it's just sort of one of those, again, something that was ingrained in me early is like, you got to be willing to do anything, and you're going to learn from everything you do. I mean, one of my first jobs was bussing tables. So I'm actually pretty good at the dishes in the sink at the office.
You might actually enjoy it, but not that you want people to know that, but you can see the end result, right?
Yeah. But I think it's like the important part of that is not putting yourself above anyone else, right? You like always be humble and be willing to, pitch in and where help is needed, because I think setting that example is a powerful leadership message. And then I think the second one is around failure. I really try not to be a micromanager. I really want folks to learn on their own. And that means failure, right? And I've certainly had my failures along the way too. But that's how we learn as humans, I think, is by making a mistake and saying, okay, I'm not going to do that again. Right. And so, rather than telling people what to do, I want them to explore what to do and learn from that, because they just become better over time. I always tell my folks, like, if everything's going well, you're probably not going to hear from me. But if I start to see things in the business that, leading indicators maybe that are not looking good, then I'm going to ask questions, right? But the questions aren't meant to put you on the spot, or they're not meant to make you feel inadequate. They're asking questions because I might be able to add some value and some experience there. Or at least get the right resources to you so that we can turn those numbers around. So I think, I'd have to say, if I was, another characteristic is really just not micromanaging, and maybe it's better to say I'm more of a macro manager. I don't know.
But we're also not saying that. I think, you're not abdicating, where it's not like you're not going to never talk to people. You're not just forever walking away from people. I'm actually very envious of that, Pat, because, as an entrepreneur, I was blessed to be a mid-level leader in another business, and then started this business. I found in the beginning, certainly flat, equal, everybody's the same. These were core value principles, statements, ideas, because everybody needs to operate the way you're talking about. There's no room for anything but that. What I have found is in entrepreneurial success stories, it's very hard to get to the spot that you just made sound so easy, because I tend to poke and say, what's going on? This doesn't look good. I'd work for you based on what you just said. Like, wow, he's here to help me, and he's going to point things out. But I like what you said, because they still own it.
Yeah.
Right. I find entrepreneurs take it back all the time, even though it's not theirs. So it's a great story. In thinking about, I'm sensitive in hearing you talk in the way you describe yourself, but when folks come on this show, I mean, my average listener isn't where they want to be. They're trying to close a gap. We make it possible because we've made mistakes. We've had failures. We've learned lessons. And that's sort of the root at what we're doing. But I also think through those experiences, you may have something you want to teach. Do you have a common lesson that you like to teach, something you'd like to share?
Oh, gosh. I think the one thing, if I had to point to anything that's helped me get, further in my career is sort of the willingness to do a job that you're not being paid to do. And what do I mean by that? I mean, like, learn as much as you can about everything you can, because you never know when that's going to help you out, number one. And then number two, like, work harder than everyone else around you.
Oh, wait, Pat, that's not on my job description.
Right. And then that's the whole point, right? Like if you want to stay in the job you have, look at your job description and do a good job. If you want the job that you don't have, then start doing things that maybe are part of that job description, or offering to do things or learning about those things, because people notice. And I'm sure you as an entrepreneur, have had many people in your business where you can point to and say, they're willing to go above and beyond what we're paying them to do. And sooner or later, there becomes an opportunity for a promotion or at a new position. And those are the people you look at, because you say they're willing to put 110%, and that's an overused phrase, but you know what I'm saying. They're the people that are like working harder than everyone else.
By the way, if you take Pat's advice and you look around and somebody taps you on the shoulder and says, slow down or something, then that just means you need to take your skills and tool belt someplace else. That's more than likely. Go do that 110% someplace where it's appreciated and it matters. So knowing your own culture and work style make a whole lot of sense. I think that's really terrific.
So I want to build on that, because I think you make a really good point there, because there are lots of managers that will feel threatened by that, right? And so I think and this is another overused phrase, but I will say is 100% accurate. Put the people around you that are better than you, and you're going to be more successful. Right? Like, if I think about the people that report to me, they're smarter than me. And I love that they're smarter than me, because they bring ideas and they bring energy and they bring, that entrepreneurial spirit. And that's what builds a business. And so if the people around me are better than me, I'm going to look more successful. I'm not going to lose my position. I think too many people feel threatened that they're going to somehow be found out that they're not as smart. But I think one of the smartest things you can do is surround yourself with people who are smarter than you.
That gift of having that self-awareness is obviously a big advantage for you. I think so many people want that. They read that, and then in the moment they blow it, right? Because, I am the boss, or why'd you leave me out of that email chain? Or how come I wasn't invited to the meeting? I mean, I think I spend my life at that intersection, helping people realize that, it's okay. And you can let people, as you said many times, that's how people grow. That's how people learn. That's how people own stuff and feel positive about things. And, this is not you, of course, but my father, mentor, sage, always said that that's why C's manage A's. And, that's an old school kind of statement. He meant himself.
Yeah.
That he was a C student. He wasn't smart enough to be the scientist or the computer guy or the engineer. He just had to learn how to manage them and, make it a productive environment. And I don't know, it always stuck with us. It may not translate today, but I think it does in some ways, but not you. Just Burkhards or C students.
No, I was mostly D's, to tell you the truth.
Oh, you see, I think I knew that. I just made it C because I wanted you to feel it, so the pandemic, obviously it's fading. We're still ironing this crazy thing out. But how did it change business, your leadership persona, and quite frankly, even maybe your own approach to how you go about living your life? I think we're all still trying to apply lessons and have our best life.
Yeah. It changed everything, right? Overnight. We all had to shut down our offices. We all had to work remotely. We all had to, invest in Zoom, and their stock did pretty well, I think. So we had to change the way we manage. And, I think looking back on it, like, if I had to say there was one thing that it helped me do from a manager, it's like build trust. Like I had to really trust people. Like I didn't need to see them in the office to trust them. I didn't need to know that they were, coming in at 9 and leaving at 5. It really shifted the management to what are you accomplishing? What is it you're getting done? And being understanding that people had families and they had young kids at home, and sometimes a 9 to 5 schedule just wasn't going to work for them. So being flexible and saying, tell me what works for you. And what you get back, or what I got back, was a ton of appreciation for being flexible and saying, thank you for recognizing, what I'm working with. And that flexibility has built loyalty, I think. Yeah. And
authentic loyalty, not the fake stuff. No, right.
Oh yeah, real deal stuff. And so some of that was trust, some of that was flexibility. And so we haven't looked back, we haven't gone to this, hey, everyone needs to be in the office 3 days a week or 5 days a week. Is there something lost without being in the office? Probably, right? There's that collaborative piece that's harder to do. There's the
spontaneity is difficult,
spontaneity, feeling part of a team, but we do things to try and overcome those things, because I do think if we reversed course and made everyone come back, that I would probably lose some trust. I would probably lose that feeling of flexibility, and I would probably lose some loyalty in that. And I don't think it's not something we're willing to give up at this time. Those things are incredibly important in building the business and maintaining the business. So I'm not ready to change. So the pandemic changed a lot for us. We also thrived in the pandemic because technology became more and more relevant. So our business actually, grew during that time. And it was someone said to me the other day, "Oh, you must have hated the pandemic. I'm sure it was really hard." I was like,
actually, the world changed 10 years in 3 months, and we had a brand new big market, right?
Exactly. Right.
Yeah. I mean, it was, for me, Pat, the hardest thing was, and this won't surprise you because I know better. I think at times I had such kind of a big entrepreneurial personality that I didn't realize how many other 2% of everybody's job I'd be doing by whipping things into a frenzy. I was taught that you leave everybody with a plus and you leave everybody better. You aid productivity by helping people keep things going. And the biggest transformation was me stepping away and letting my leaders that I had grown step in and do it.
Yeah.
And how about, for me, I got to tell you, and I hope folks don't mind me being this honest. What saved me was being able to get off of the Tuesday and Thursday night rubber chicken dinner circuit. Like, I do think that saved my soul after 30 years in business, and being able to connect with that stuff with technology or just say no. I don't know. To me, I missed some of it, but I also just had to spread it around. And, obviously it's hard, but things have to give and you got to have a balanced life.
You do. And certainly, some things have changed since it's ended. I certainly travel more. But
Okay.
in my business, it's, important that I meet with donors, and a lot of that takes place face to face. But I have to agree with you. Like, I turn down a lot of chicken dinners now.
And by the way, the point is, I never had the guts.
Yeah. To say no.
No.
Yeah.
And I know that's like a whole book, right? Everybody should just say no to what they don't. Isn't a heck yeah. But that gave me an opportunity to know what a balanced life was and to really know who my stakeholders or shareholders really are and to give more of them to them,
Yeah. And I'm sure you go to your share of chicken dinners still, but you're just more selective now.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
So I have a fun question for you, and I do submit questions in advance. Pat admitted that he didn't even look at them, which I love. What advice would you give your 21-year-old self?
Oh,
I know you're only 24, but
I'm not. I have to remember what my 21-year-old self looked like. What advice? I think there's not a lot. I don't have a lot of regrets. I don't look back and say, "Gosh, I wish I had done this differently," or "I wish I had done that differently." I didn't end up completing my college degree, right? I got a 2-year degree instead of a 4-year. And that's because I was offered a full-time job at Discover and it was too much to balance. So I just let it go. I think if I had to do it again, I probably would have pushed myself to finish that just for my own self and my own credibility, because sometimes I felt like I shouldn't be in the room with people that, I wasn't as educated as. But having said that, there's not a lot I would change. I think hard work paid off, perseverance paid off. You can say luck, but I think luck, we all generate our own luck, by showing up. 90% of life is showing up. And I think showing up to things like being a volunteer, sitting on, some nonprofit boards, like those aren't things you get paid for, but they're
great experiences.
Great experience. It's how you meet people. It brings opportunities that you don't necessarily see, and I always say that, like, I'll meet with anyone. Heck, I met with you, right?
You did, and look at us now.
But I'll meet with anyone because you just don't know what you're going to learn. You don't know where it's going to go.
Which tells me you're curious.
Yeah. Well, curiosity, I think, is a big part of being an entrepreneur, right?
I absolutely agree. I admire that. And I think we do probably share that curiosity. And, many times my team will look at my calendar and, why are you meeting with them? And what are you doing there? And as I said, because they asked for time, and it's not just giving back. I'm not some highfalutin special person, but they asked for time and I want to help, whatever it is that fits. I don't know if you'll like this question, but I think a lot of times folks are thinking about how to get an advantage. And, you work at a high level, but do you have a favorite life hack or routine or morning routine or anything you do to kind of save your soul through as hard as you work?
Oh, well, I definitely, try and take time out for myself. And, people talk about work-life balance, right? And yep. I'll tell you, my favorite quote is from Jeff Bezos. And I'm not to say that I'm a huge Jeff Bezos fan, right? But he said, for him, there's no such thing as work-life balance. It's work-life integration. And I really try and live to that. So what does that mean? It means if my daughter has something going on at school and parents are invited to at 2:00 in the afternoon, that I treat that as much of a priority as I treat, an important meeting at work. And so really what I'm doing is I may not be at work at 2:00 in the afternoon where everyone else is, but I'm integrating that into my life. It might mean I'm up at 6 a.m. sending emails or whatever, but that's okay, right? So I just kind of balance all those things to make them work for me, and for the family and for what my business needs. And so I never feel like, oh, I'm out of balance. I just feel like I'm doing the right things at the right time. Yeah.
But giving, it may seem novel to you, but giving your life the categories of, family or community or work or project and blocking it is not something that, people may hear it, but not a lot of people actually execute it, right? Like where they think about what's most important in my life and how do I sort of balance all those things. So I think that's really good. Got a final question for you, and then I'll turn it to you to close with whatever you might like. But do you have a favorite book that you like to recommend, a book you gift?
Oh, I don't gift any books, but
okay.
But if I had to point to anything
mean,
Yeah.
other than my book, Opposite the Crowd.
Oh, that was
Don't.
my favorite.
There you go. That's what I thought. Yeah.
um, you know, oh gosh, what is the name of it now? It's gonna slip my mind. The Art of Motorcycle Maintenance.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm
I
talking
do.
about.
I do.
Yeah. And the reason I love that book is because
We'll get it and put it in liner notes. So
yeah,
talk about it, and we'll make sure the title's there for people.
yeah, it's largely about a journey across country with a father and son on a motorcycle, but half the book is about sort of math, and the other half is about these life lessons. And I think as I read it, it was very confusing, and it was starting to like bother me because I've been trying to figure out the math problems or whatever. And then I got to the end, I realized it wasn't about that at all, right?
Yeah.
That really it was about father spending time with his son, and and it was about the journey. And so when I reflect on that book, it kind of opens my mind a little bit to say it's not always, the details. Sometimes it's the culmination of many of those details that you see the light, if you will. And someone else told me something really important that I love to cite. And I was on a hike, and someone said, has anyone ever said to you, like, partway through your hikes, stop and look back and see where you came from? I don't know if there's anyone ever said that to you, Chris.
I can't imagine.
But you said that to me on a hike, and I cite that all the time, and because I think it's so simple, yet it's so important to look back and see where you came from, and those lessons that you learned along the journey, instead of just focusing straight ahead all the time.
I appreciate that. One of the things I probably rail on the most is if people would just spend a half hour on themselves a week, and I think one of my favorite meditative state things is to, we're talking about, we were on a hike and looking back, but what we're talking about is reflection.
Yeah.
And I think, so I'll give this, everybody. It's almost Thanksgiving. You have an extra day. Get your calendar out and reflect on the year, all the cool things you did, the goals you set, the plans, and just write it down. You'd be surprised at how much you got done and how much you forgot already of where you've been, who you spent time with, what you achieved. Pat, I knew you'd be great. I didn't know you'd be this great, but I really do appreciate it. Any other, I think we just did our best, but any other words of wisdom to drive this home?
No, I want to leave on that note, because that is something I take with me all the time. And that's something I learned from you, and I appreciate about you. Every time I spend time with you, I learn something else. And so thank you for your time today, because I always enjoy it.
So on that note, let's go on our next hike.
Let's do it.
Last year, my dad, Alan Burkhard, and I released our book, Opposite the Crowd. It's January 2024, and we've released the paperback version of the book, and it's now available on Amazon, along with hardback, Kindle, and audio formats. We've adjusted the price to be more accessible for everyone. On Audible, it will cost you a credit, or you can pay outright. If you'd like to get the audiobook a little cheaper, you can look at Spotify and other outlets that sell audiobooks. We have the links to where you can find it in the show notes, so take you straight to it. And Opposite the Crowd. If you want the life you want, you got to know who you are.